Another day, another Politics Joe podcast, and another stand-in for Ed Campbell. We've upgraded Ava Santina, haven't we? It's not
with
bad.
Me?
Well, no, you're always here.
Right,
you're always here. But we don't have Ed, but we do have the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan.
Can I just say, Ed, I was a free transfer. Last day of the window. The window was about to close.
It is.
And they snapped me up.
Deadline day.
Don't take it personally, Ed.
Deadline day, and fresh polling out today, Sadiq. Let's just get straight into it, shall we? We'll cut the pleasantries. I think it was Servation, or maybe Savanta, actually. Your lead's gone from 20 points to 13 points, now 10 points. You worried? Polling day tomorrow?
Listen, I've said for the last few weeks and months, actually, this is going to be a close election. I think this will be the closest election London has seen. I always predicted the polls would narrow. What makes me even more nervous is I've been speaking to many Londoners who didn't realise they need photo ID. The Tories have changed the rules. Two big things they've done in this mayoral election. One is for the first time it's first past the post. So normally Londoners can vote with their heart's first preference. It could be Greens or another smaller party. And their second preference is like an insurance policy. The Tories have got away with that, which means it really is, according to the last 24 years, only one of two parties that can win, the Tories or me. And secondly, they've introduced for the first time ever in our country photo ID. So unless you've got a passport or driving license, an older person's travel card, but not a younger person's travel
Absolutely
card,
not. That makes it
you can't vote.
Well,
that means there's 900,000 Londoners eligible to vote who haven't got photo ID, and that's why I'm incredibly nervous.
900,000?
15%. 15% of Londoners have not got a photo ID, and what really concerns me is 1 out of 3 eligible young Londoners on the electoral register. If that wasn't bad enough, only half of those below the age of 30 vote, compared to more than 75% of those above the age of 65. So the Tories deliberately made the playing field as uneven as possible, which makes it really hard this week, Thursday.
Well, you're talking to them now. You're talking to the under 30s. So what should we say to them? Don't be lazy tomorrow? Well,
firstly, to my daughters, please tidy your bedrooms. Look, come on.
They are listening to the podcast,
come on,
aren't they?
Anissa, come on, Amara. I don't ask for much, you've got to admit. That's the most important thing.
Did you tell them you were coming on today?
No, I haven't. This is a surprise. Because basically, because what happens is they listen to you because I'd rather listen. Oh my God, my dad's on, and he's shamed us. But secondly, look, I mean, there's a great saying from one of my favourite politicians of all time. He's a fictitious politician. He said, "Decisions are taken by those that show up." And if you don't vote this Thursday, don't think others won't vote. They will. And there's a reason why, people are not unreasonably complain. Why is it that Westminster politics is obsessed with pensioners, the triple lock, obsessed with making sure they look after older people for a variety of reasons, not least because they vote, right? It's self-preservation. So if my campaign manager would say, not mine because he's very good, they'd say, if you've got an hour to spare, don't spend it with younger people because they don't vote. Spend it with older people because they do vote. And that's why you see the Tories manifesto, what there is of it, is focusing on older people because they vote. We focused on younger people because that's the future of our city. And so I implore younger people, please vote this Thursday and take your voter ID.
But you're big. The other option tomorrow, who we did invite to be here, but she was unavailable. I think she was on. I think she was too busy liking tweets that endorsed Enoch Powell.
Well, can I just deal with that, Ava? I mean, look, I've never faced a politician that can win an election who has supported Donald Trump on a number of occasions, liked Enoch Powell. When it comes to, words that are clearly anti-Muslim, Islamophobic and racist, call them, inverted commas, hurty words, amplified a swastika with pride colours with some sort of glee, said things like the black community is a problem with crime and is also in favour of massively increasing stop and search. So, you're right, Ava, to take us back to the choice this Thursday. The choice this Thursday is somebody who loves this city, will always talk about this city, warts and all. Somebody who's trying to build a fairer, greener, safer London versus somebody who always talks down our city, is divisive, is hard right. And I make this point as well, I know for a fact if I lose and the Tory wins, Lawrence Fox will be cheering, Lee Anderson will be cheering, Tommy Robinson will be cheering, Swallow Brabham will be cheering. Those across the globe that don't know her but know of me will be cheering. Donald Trump will be cheering. Viktor Orban will be cheering. Marie Le Pen will be cheering. That's what's on the ballot paper this Thursday.
Do you think her campaign's been racist?
I think some of the things she has said and done are racist. I think the fact that we saw this Sunday in the Observer newspaper There are closed Facebook groups that she's a member of, and she's condoned and encouraged people who have said things that are anti-Semitic, Islamophobic and racist. Causes me concern. Anybody in this day and age that can like Enoch Powell, there's questions to be answered. Anybody who makes a sweeping generalization about people because of the color of their skin, the black community has a problem with crime, has serious questions to answer. But I don't like talking about horrible people, but when Lawrence Fox does a tweet with a swastika with pride colours, what does that mean? I spent this Sunday at the Two Brewers in Brixton, Lambeth, in Clapham, where two members of that community were the victims of a horrible homophobic attack. This weekend we commemorated the awful homophobic attacks in Soho and Brixton that took place 25 years ago. So when you're amplifying things online, you must know that it can lead to not just online racist behaviour, but racist behaviour in real life as well. And I think, if you're a responsible politician aspiring to be the Mayor of London, you've got to know that's a consequence. And this is not dog whistle politics. This is megaphone politics.
This is kind of becoming a recurring trend, right, in the Tory campaigns against you. We're talking about how fantastic and young this podcast is. I'm old enough to remember Zach Goldsmith's campaign against you, right? Yeah. And it seems peculiar to me that you look at London as a multicultural, diverse city, a place where difference is actually celebrated. I don't understand. What's the rationale? What's the Conservative rationale for running that type of campaign?
It goes back to Ava's very first question, which is, why young people should vote. They've calculated, the Tories, that young people don't vote. And I'm making a generalisation to make my point. Older people may have some views that are small c conservative. They may be able to be pandered, to be scared about certain things. And let's encourage a small group of people to turn out, which will mean that they win the election. That's their route to victory. And actually, those advising them will say, hold on a sec, that's how Trump won in 2016. That was the genesis of the Brexit campaign in 2016, get Brexit done, all right? And so they've seen there is a route to victory that is talking down, that is fear, that is division, that is hatred. And that's the campaign they've used. The number of times where I'm supposed to be doing debates against my opponent and she's not turned up and they've sent a substitute. I mean, that shows, rather than having a debate, this has been a battle of ideas, a battle of competing visions. It is them having a submarine campaign below the radar. They've paid for, commercially delivered direct mails. They've paid for adverts on Instagram, YouTube and Facebook, deliberately targeting a certain demographic. And I think those people they're targeting aren't as bad as the Tories think. They're not deplorables. They're decent people whose fears are being played on, and I'd rather address people's fears rather than play on them.
But Sunak hasn't actually been out on the campaign trail with Susan Hall, so either he's embarrassed of her and just hoping that perhaps they'll get through on the Conservative ticket, or maybe he's just been busy.
Well, look, actually, look back to Uxbridge and Ruislip. He wasn't out and about there either, and that was a campaign where basically, the Tories had a campaign of scaremongering and fearmongering and won. And I think that's the tactics they used this time as well. Let's talk about
Uxbridge, because that was essentially a ULEZ referendum. Tomorrow, potentially, Susan Hall would quite like it to be a London-wide ULEZ referendum. Now, one of the big attack lines that she's had is this pay-per-mile scheme that she's been accusing you of backing. Can you definitively say there has never been any plans for a pay-per-mile scheme?
No, there has been. Boris Johnson began them when he was mayor. So in Boris Johnson's transport strategy, it's there in black and white. The paper mile scheme, and so when I took over, we carried on the work taking place on the paper mile scheme, but I've ruled it out. I've said quite clearly it's not going to happen. I've actually written to the Commissioner to make it quite clear it won't happen as long as I'm mayor. It's in my manifesto that it's not going to happen.
So why is she allowed to lie about it then?
Well, because that leads to people who are nervous about their car and are nervous about Sadiq Khan, the mayor, charging them for driving their car, voting Tory. It's a classic device to scare people to vote Conservative. Just like in the Uxbridge and Ruislip by-election, that by-election came a month before we expanded the ULEZ for those that don't live in London. We first had it in central London, and then a couple of years later expanded it to inner London, up to North Circular and South Circular, and a month after Uxbridge we're going to expand it to all of London, in other words, outer London. And so the impression the Tories gave in that election was every single person will pay £12.50. In fact, the evidence was that actually most people have a compliant car. And I tell you what, a month after ULEZ was brought in, 19 out of 20 cars in Uxbridge and Ruislip were shown to be compliant, not paying a penny, but seeing the benefits of cleaner air. But the Tories scared people into thinking they have to pay this charge. I heard this story from somebody, a Labour canvasser knocking on a door with a Tesla in the driveway, voting Tory because they were scared about the consequences of ULEZ. They got an electric Tesla in their driveway.
Would the the Department for Transport, even be able to repeal ULEZ if, or want to repeal ULEZ if Susan Hall got in? So tomorrow she gets in and she says, right, we're done with ULEZ.
Yeah,
Would the department want to do that?
I don't want facts to get into the way of, Tory lies, but it's not possible to get rid of ULEZ without proper engagement, consultation and so forth. So she simply couldn't do it on day one as she's claiming to do.
Okay.
You mentioned debates with Susan Hall. You did an LBC panel with her, and you were talking about knife crime, you were talking about machetes, and obviously we are talking in the context of what happened in Hainault yesterday. You said to her that she'd been watching too much of The Wire in the context of that discussion. Were you right to say that, do you think?
Absolutely. Let me see why I was right to say that. I'll come to Hainault in a second if you want. So the Conservatives, as an example of their fear-mongering and scaremongering, released a video trying to scare people in relation to the consequences of me being the mayor. That video wasn't of London. It was of Penn Station, New York. It was of New York. They used images from America to scare people in the city to think that's what goes on in London. And this man, I can't talk too much about the case because obviously I've been briefed in ways that there's going to be a criminal case, we hope. But he's not a member of a gang. I didn't see groups roaming around with machetes. And there'll be a further discussion about the consequences of austerity and mental ill health and so forth. But, it's really important that, we understand what happens in our city. Yes, crime is far too high across the country. But the idea that, you can use images of Penn Station to try and scare people to vote in for your party, I think is one we should reject.
Can we talk a little bit about what causes knife crime? Because, you've mentioned it already about sort of the racism that's often attached to this conversation. I actually am sort of on the receiving end of quite a lot of it because I deigned to say this weekend that,
of racism?
Yeah, bizarre. Well, no,
Wow.
I called it racist to say that black people are more inclined to stab each other.
You cannot be a white man anymore.
I know, it's terrible. It's terrible at the top. Really, really bad. Yeah, okay. So, and my Twitter mentions are a sewer right now with people being like, no, Ollie, actually, black people are more culturally inclined to stab each other. So I would just sort of invite you to talk about what you think actually drives knife crime in this city.
So one of the reasons why we have in London a public health approach to fighting violent crime is it's a lesson we learned from Glasgow, who fought violent crime many years ago. You speak to the victims of violent crime in Glasgow and see the perpetrators, they're not black. Nobody says white on white crime in Glasgow when there was violent crime taking place there. You speak to people across the country where deprived communities are white, where those living in poverty, alienation, and inequality are white. Nobody talks about white on white crime. I'm afraid the causes of crime are complex. Deprivation, poverty, alienation, lack of opportunity, mental ill health that's not being treated. I'm not excusing criminality, I'm just explaining the causes. You do a map of London, and in the poorest communities, the most deprived communities, is a disproportionate number of black people. And so, black people are more likely to be the victims of crime because of those communities, and younger people are often responsible for the crime of various different backgrounds. The vast majority of black people in the city not only have never committed a crime, but are peaceful, law-abiding people. And these sweeping generalizations leads to a situation where in the past, black young Londoners have been stopped and searched in disproportionate numbers. You go to speak to teachers in schools, disproportionate numbers of black people being excluded, have mental ill health that's been undiagnosed and untreated, less likely to be fulfilling their potential in decent jobs. And so let's focus on the causes, because I think we're not going to solve this by arresting ourselves out of this. You've got to deal with the causes, the complex causes, invested in youth clubs, invested in off-school clubs, invested in mentoring, invested in summer schemes like we're doing from City Hall, despite government cuts, as well as dealing with the consequences. Yeah, more police.
It was a pretty important day yesterday for the LGBT community because the Admiral Duncan, it was the anniversary of the nail attack that happened in 1999. That pub is actually facing closure. There, like many LGBT nightlife venues in central London, it is at the whim of licensing. Can you commit to protecting LGBT spaces in a better way than we've done before?
Sure. Well, the first thing is, for those of your listeners that aren't from this community, it's important to remind ourselves, those that aren't, the impact that the nail bomb attack had, the ripples of fear the entire community felt, not just 25 years ago, but now as well. If you're somebody from the BTQ plus community, it's scary being who you are, loving who you want. That's why these venues are really important. They are safe spaces where you can just be who you want to be. You feel empowered and you have a sense of belonging. So when people ask me the question, why can't this community go to, inverted commas, mainstream pubs or mainstream clubs or whatever? They can and they do, but there needs to be a space that you feel you can be yourself. And what's happened over the last 20 years is a massive reduction in these sorts of venues for a variety of reasons. Since 2016, we've invested in venues that are at risk. We've invested in changing the planning laws. So when a developer wants to build luxury flats next door to a pub and complains about the noise, they're required to put noise insulation in rather than closing the venue down. We've changed the planning rules. So if a developer wants to knock down a pub and build luxury flats, they've got to put a pub back there as well as affordable housing. But also we've seen in the last couple of years, not just the pandemic, business rates going through the roof, rents going through the roof, skill shortages, labour shortages because of Brexit. So my promise to this community is we're going to carry on supporting you, working with good councils. Westminster's got a particular challenge, which is lots of residents live in those streets and they complain about the noise, right? My point is, in a respectful way, you chose to move to Soho. I mean, you must have known when you did your research. It's quite a nice, vibrant community and stuff. So we have those conversations with the council. Not unreasonably, the council gets nervous before a council election because residents vote, businesses don't. But we're going to carry on speaking to the council because these venues are crucial, particularly for those who have just come to London and just finding out who they are, because it provides a safe space.
Yeah, GAY Lates was an integral part of that community, and it's heartbreaking.
No, Jeremy's done. They've done. All these owners we know very well. They've done a great job. Profit margins are down. They're making losses. They can't employ their staff for love of money. Business rates are going through the roof. The Labour Party, if we win the general election, they're going to abolish business rates. Really important. We're also going to support those businesses in relation to moving to this great city.
How do you think Amy LeMay's getting on as Knight Czar?
I think she's done a great job. Look, I mean, we don't forget. Listen, don't forget. It's all about context, Ollie. In the sense of look at global cities across the globe who are struggling. I speak regularly to New York, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, Paris, Madrid, Milan. They're all struggling getting people back into the centre. And we've got 32 boroughs in London who decide their own licensing laws. We don't decide the licensing laws. I think devolution isn't about taking powers away. It's giving powers to a council. We do know, though, that in the last 8 years, we reduced these clubs closing down, so it's a plateau, more open. But you can't run away from the cost of doing business. The cost of doing business is humongous. Speak to anybody who runs a nighttime venue, whether it's in the LGBTQ plus community or not. It's incredibly hard. You can't get skills, let alone labour, in some of these businesses. Many restaurants aren't doing lunch sit-ins because they've not got the staff. It's really hard. And
that's why you're going to push Keir Starmer to back the 18 to 30 programme with the EU to swap workers. So
there's two things we're doing in relation to this area. One is an Erasmus-style scheme, which we can do without changing government. So I've already spoken to mayors across the world. We've got funding. So we will set up, irrespective of what happens in the general election, an Erasmus-style scheme for students to go overseas, including funding. So the government's children's scheme's got no funding, so it's only the rich kids that can afford to go overseas. Ours will be two ways, and there'll be funding. Secondly, I do think there should be a work mobility scheme. What you're alluding to is those between 18 and 30 being able to go and work overseas. This government has managed to negotiate deals with places like South Korea and Canada. I think the key thing is on our doorstep, Europe and stuff. And so, I'll be lobbying the Labour government to do that.
We'll talk about housing a little bit. We're talking about, obviously, younger people over the course of this interview, and it is the most important issue, I think, for a lot of younger people that they face. So, what's your plan? And secondly, what are you planning to do in terms of planning itself?
Yeah. So we have got a housing crisis. I think this is the number one issue facing our city today. And actually, good global cities are also facing this crisis. The supply of affordable homes has not met the demand for decades. So a number of things we've got to do in the medium to long term, build more homes. And so if I'm re-elected, at least 40,000 new council homes, at least 6,000 rent control homes, irrespective of whoever the government is. We're also going to fund tenants' legal fees to take on unscrupulous landlords, because many tenants haven't got the means to do so. And we're also going to have a London-wide licensing scheme to make sure quality of accommodation improves. That will happen irrespective of the government. If we get a Labour government, Keir Starmer has promised with Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner 1.5 million new homes in the first term. Big chunk affordable, big chunk coming to London. But in the short term, we've got more than 2.7 million Londoners renting. We've got to sort the private rental market out. So the number of things we're going to be doing there, lobbying the Labour government, because this government's let us down, to bring in no-fault evictions finally. Because basically, I meet tenants who complain about damp and mould. They're served a notice to quit. They challenge the rent going up. They're served notice to quit. And so we need to get rid of no-fault evictions. Really, really important. Secondly, what we've got to do is make sure we improve the rights tenants have. The three big things tenants complain of is lack of security of tenure. That goes back to the assured short tenancies brought in by Thatcher in the 80s. Secondly, the quality of accommodation. And thirdly, the rents they pay. So what I'm lobbying the Labour Party for is to give us the powers, and not all parts of the country are the same, give us the powers to freeze rents and move towards rent controls going forward. My 6,000 rent control homes, I'm hoping will give Labour the confidence to show it can be done, and there's not a massive shortage of supply coming into London.
Your campaign told us that you would impose rent controls in the last election cycle in 2021. Why haven't you done it since then? Why are you only promising it now? Again.
Because we need a change in legislation to bring in rent controls. We can't do it without primary legislation. So in the absence of primary legislation, we're going to build rent control homes to show that it can be done. So the 6,000 homes I'm promising will be rent control homes. So the rents will not go up at more than, at the very worst, inflation. The rents in those properties are going to be linked to key workers' salaries. So you will know if you're in one of those 6,000 rent control homes, they're controlled in perpetuity. Vienna did something similar when they began rent control homes as well. Not all their homes are rent control. They began this way. And I'm hoping that will give the Labour government the confidence to bring in rent control. What Scotland's done is brought in rent freezes. Again, that's because the Scottish Parliament had the powers to do so. We've not got the powers to do that. So in the meantime, we're making sure we massively ratchet up the amount of affordable homes we build. We change the definition of an affordable home. It isn't one costing £500,000 to buy or 8% of market value to rent. It's either London living rent, a third of average earnings, council homes linked to manual worker salary, or shared ownership part rent. And we're also going to get rid of leaseholds as well. What I've said is, in our properties, there are no obscene service charges and ground rents. And I'll be lobbying the Labour government. And I spoke to one of our shadow team last week to get rid of the whole concept of leaseholds.
In terms of actual house building, the Centre for Cities estimates that there's a shortfall of about 4 million homes in the UK more broadly. So by that number, central Labour government's pledge to build 1.5 million in the first term isn't going to match that shortfall. We need to look at planning if we're going to seriously look at house building on a mass scale, and that's probably going to involve building on parts of the Green Belt. Where do you stand on building on the Green Belt?
Yeah, can I just go back a step, which is we published some research this week which showed in London, Labour councils on average are building 3,000 more homes than Tory councils. They're using the same London plan. And so, can-do councils are building record numbers of homes, Conservative councils aren't. So, and they both use the London plan. So it's not an issue of just planning. There are other issues as well, which I can talk to. Every year in London, roughly speaking, 300,000 homes are given permission to be built, but they're not being built. Land banking, people wanting to raise values of the land and so forth. There are tricks of the trade developers and builders and landowners are doing. In relation to Greenbelt, my view is we've first got to make sure all the brownfield sites are built on. Lots of brownfield sites in London, across the country. To give your listeners an idea what they mean former gasworks, former petrol stations, former car parks. They're brownfield sites. They go first. Secondly, there's things called grey belt. What grey belt is something that's technically green belt, but it's a car wash. It's a car park. It's horrible quality land. That should be built on as well. And then we have a conversation about green belt. If it's the case that brownfield's built on, grey belt's built on, and there's still a need for more housing and there's a demand, then we can have a conversation about green belt. The problem getting green belt first is those that own the green belt will suddenly see valuations go through the roof, right? And then when you want to build houses on that green belt, it's going to be very, very expensive, which means the properties are going to be very expensive, which means people will still be priced out. And so it's really important to do it incrementally, which is what we're going to do.
Is that why City Hall blocked Labour-controlled Enfield Council from building on their green belt?
Yeah, as quality of green belt. So some things we're allowed to go through, some things we don't allowed to go through. In Enfield, we think it's really important where there's good quality green belt, it's not built on.
Sadiq, thank you very much for taking the time. Third trimester, do we think?
Listen, I hope the delivery is good.
Yeah.
If it's the third trimester, but it's not about making history. It's about shaping the future of our city and our country. And the real prize this year is, for the last 8 years, I've been rowing against the tide of a Tory government. I'm quite excited with the potential of sailing with the winds of a Labour government at my back. So this year, the possibility for the first time in 20 years, Labour mayor and a Labour government, and I'm so excited by that.
Sadiq Khan, thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it.